So welcome, Logan. This is the second Movers and Mavericks podcast with Logan Gelbrich.
Damn, we're
What up?
rolling. You guys have good guests. I mean, other than myself as a normal guest, all of your other guests are exceptional. God dang it, I set myself up for that.
We've been really pleased with all our guests.
Yeah,
Otherwise, we wouldn't have had them on. But,
fair. That's fair.
But from the obscure to the more well-known.
And there's also
they've all-
been
they've all-
some really amazing conversations we didn't really expect to have.
Mm-hmm.
I think what we found is this format works really well for us because we're not trying to fit someone into a box and
Right.
say, well, this is what we need you to do to fit into our vision. We just kind of say, talk. Let's just have a conversation. It allows people to kind of talk.
That's the upside of long format, right?
Yeah.
And I think podcasts, there's all this kind of interesting science about podcasts, but, you know, again, not to like make judgment, but there's something about this format that just like you can't put on TV. You know, like you don't pile people into a movie theater to watch this. I mean, right? Necessarily. However, the delivery mechanism of a podcast is quite appropriate because you get the upside of long format, not edited or whatever, and then you have this like I was talking with someone who does this for a living, but the focus of the mind, because there's generally no visual stimulus or other stimulus, basically how people are hearing it allows them to focus on like what we're saying, you know? Like what other format could you do? Like would you read an article that was a transcript of this conversation?
Yeah, it'd be a
There's-
really long...
you know what I mean?
I don't know
Like-
how many pages an hour's conversation translates
Yeah.
to, but it must be a book.
It's like the perfect intersection of a lot of different things, I think.
Also, consuming it. I mean, I always think of people consuming it while commuting in London.
Mm-hmm.
It's a format that carries through all aspects of your journey.
Yeah.
So walking to the bus stop, getting the bus to the tube, getting on the tube, walking to the office. You know, if you're reading a book, you're reading it on the bus, you're reading it on the tube.
Of course, yeah.
So it kind of works in that format too,
Mm-hmm.
or in that context too.
Yeah, it's cool. It's an interesting time. I was one of those people that when podcasts came out was like, well, that's obviously dumb because it's like the things we already have, like radio, but worse because it's not live or see, you know what I mean? Like it was just like, I totally missed the whole concept. I was like, I see no value in that. And obviously there's huge value.
But it is a strange medium because it is radio. If 5 years ago we'd said we've got this new technology that's, honestly, this is entertainment, this is the future of it.
Right.
It's called radio.
Yeah. People would be like, what?
Yeah.
There's a mildly famous version of what I just said between Tate Fletcher and Joe Rogan, because like when Joe was starting his first podcast, he was telling Tate about it, and Tate's like, I can't think of a worse idea, like literally, you know what I mean? And this is a guy that, like, within 20 minutes of the episode being posted, there's like 800,000 downloads and then several million by the end of the week. You know, it's like, I don't know.
Is that because people don't really have conversations anymore? When you were talking, Chris, I just wonder if lots of people aren't having that stimulus. There's lots about reading books. There's lots about pushing information at people. And sometimes you just want to hear people talking.
Yeah.
And it not being so structured.
Yeah.
Everything is so A to B, and maybe it's a tech way. Like life hits this funnel and it goes. And sometimes you just, I don't want to be in a funnel. I don't want it to be so linear that it's just the information. Like we lose the human connection of serendipity and, you know, just chance.
Yeah. I mean, likely so. Also, you know, and there's different kinds of podcasts as well, but this long format style too, I think, allows for people to peer into something that they're not involved in, and they get to be witness to an important conversation. You know, like, not that every guest needs to be like a uniquely remarkable person, but there's something compelling to seeing like the version of Richard Branson that's like sitting around the coffee table, because where else do you hear that conversation, you know, or a guest like that, you know? And so I don't know, I think
We get that a lot. People commenting at how much they feel like they're just in the kitchen
Fly on the
listening
wall.
to a conversation in the living room type thing.
Yeah.
And I think that's our way. Like, we're not in any group,
Yeah.
which maybe supports how we do things. We just come in. Like, we're not climbers, but
Yeah, you can.
we'll go and speak to a climber, or we'll come and speak to you. We
Yeah.
don't come in dragging a sled. Maybe we should do.
That's right.
We should.
You try to like fully chameleon the interview. Like, yeah, bro. Anyway, just like pumping some iron this morning. You like, wait, like, we don't need to talk like that.
Method podcasting.
Yeah. I was looking at the photo of y'all's dinner with all the guests in London, and it's like that's a perfect kind of visual, depiction of what you're saying. Just an eclectic group, right?
That was a great meal.
I was quite jealous.
It would have been amazing to have had you there.
I was on the wrong side of the pond.
But we'll do one in it. We'll do one here. We'll do a full one. The one that we had the other night with just 4 was quite an exclusive
That's right.
group.
Exclusive.
Yeah, we're kind of hoping maybe we can come back in March, April time for a few more weeks. So if we do, then we now have like 10 people that we've podcasted over here, and that equates to a dinner.
It does.
Yeah.
You guys are VIP. You're always welcome here. I'm looking
Thank you.
for apartments for you guys when we're not hanging out. So now you know.
Nice. Take it.
One day.
That's exactly right.
So what's happening in Logan's world, or the world of Deuce, without getting too personal on Logan?
We can get as personal as you want. I am doing quite a bit of development of like the online education. So launched a new ebook, like a premium ebook since we spoke last, that really sort of outlines some universal truths and sort of how-tos to develop culture, high performance culture. And it's an interest of mine, and it's something that I think people attribute Deuce with and sort of maybe me with, and so I wanted to speak to that. I think a lot of times business owners, or I don't know, people that recognize amazing culture think of it as this like magic potion, this thing that kind of happens, and you got to be, grateful when you see it, and you never know when it's going to go away. And yeah, of course, like those things may be true, but if you really look at what we know about high performance teams and the cultures inside of them, I don't believe that it's just magic. I mean, the results can be magical, and I think that's what people feel, but you can really intentionally, on purpose, meticulously build a high performing culture. And that is not something that is fully by accident. And so, yeah, that's exciting. More summits, so I'll be going to Australia and New Zealand in February, and then back here in March. And then I think we'll be adding another European date. But yeah, just trying to evolve my leadership game, the book, which I think I've recorded 50 or 60 podcasts over the last 3 years talking about this mysterious book that may be coming out. And I literally was just trading emails with the cover artist, so that's like a new thing. So yeah, it's all...
Is this the Go Right book?
That's right, yeah.
I thought that was already in existence.
A lot of people thought that. You'll know.
Sold out.
Oh yeah, you'll know. So yeah, wrapping that up has been a long road, and maybe the hardest thing I've done so far. Excited about that.
Hardest thing because...
It really just challenged my abilities. I think we all have strengths and weaknesses, and it tapped me for who I was, for sure. I started it as one person and finished it as another person, and I think consciously I knew that that's what the experience of writing that book would be for me, and that it would really push me, and I got all of that and more. So yeah, it really over-delivered in that sense. It's such a... I don't want to say everybody's experience would be like this, writing a book, but if you're going to write a book yourself about something that maybe hasn't been said before, conceptually, it's really going to challenge you. and it pretty much broke me in half a couple times. But I feel good about it now, and
Break you in half because you were were you writing about what you were living through, like that changed? Because it's called Go Right.
yeah,
Correct?
Going Right, the subtitle, a logical justification for pursuing your dreams. Basically, it presents an argument about decision making, about how most people are conceding their best selves and then justifying that. Basically, saying it's the more reasonable choice. The alternative, of course, being seeking your own peak expression and in any lane of your life. And so what I did was put together just an objective, sort of emotionless argument in support of pursuing your best self. And the way the math shakes out is that it's just we're in much greater advantage in choosing our peak potential in career and in relationships and lifestyle and otherwise. The meta sort of thing that you're talking about is, the book isn't about me writing the book, but I was living the sort of real challenging choices of the book as I did it. So selfishly, I got that experience.
What are the inhibitors presented in the book to not living your best self?
Well, there's a lot of great, I don't want to say great. There's a lot of compelling reasons to not pursue your best self. Generally speaking, it's not going to be fashionable. It'll be the least popular of two choices. It's going to be harder. It's going to feel as if there's more uncertainty. Human beings generally avoid uncertainty. For example, giving up, say, what you really want to do with your time, say like in your career or lifestyle, to do something more socially reinforced. It feels like you have more support in doing that. You feel less on your own, and you begin to trick yourself, and the book sort of uncovers this, into believing that there's less risk in doing that and that there's more certainty in doing that. And so, we can call these sort of distractions for what they are and show people that uncertainty is real in both directions. You choosing your peak self, maybe going for that thing that you really want in your life, has uncertainty, yes, but so does an existence that seems much safer. Taking up the job that your parents sort of conditioned you to want, or moving to the right town, going to the right college, doing the sort of check the right boxes. It's a lie to assume that is somehow a life without uncertainty. And in a lot of ways, going down that road builds up an even more fragile existence, because you can get, and we see this all the time, 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 years down the road, avoiding uncertainty. And then you're hit with a bout of adversity, which is coming your way, regardless of who you are. And then you're just not really fit to endure that or survive that. If you, just to make things up here in the moment, like if you're extremely passionate about teaching, you want to be a coach of some kind or a school teacher of some kind, but you fear the uncertainty, financial or otherwise, in making this sort of a life for yourself and going down that road that would allow you to commit to it, that would allow you to work more deeply and more focused. It would then make you more resilient, and you'd be able to experience flow, and you would learn these skills that are highly transferable. If you choose then something that feels more safe, like I really am passionate about that, but you can't make a lot of money, or who knows if I could get my coaching business off the ground. So you just choose something maybe at random that feels more certain, like selling insurance or something like this. Well, when you get fired, or your company goes under, or the industry trends change, and now your career as an insurance person is now obsolete, you get fired or you get released, what skills and what value do you have to offer moving laterally to something else? Because you're a person that avoided everything that was hard. You haven't really developed any skills with any real intensity. You sort of did what you could to avoid whatever it was that you're afraid of, versus someone who, learns a lot about themselves and a lot about their environment and a lot about skills that you can use other places, like dedication and attention to detail and these things that aren't task specific. If you really did vulnerably go for this sort of coaching business or becoming the best school teacher that you could be, and so in a weird way, many people are thinking that they're choosing a safer bet, but they build this very dangerous environment where if the rug gets pulled out from under you or you experience some sort of adversity there, you've done almost nothing to prepare for what comes next, and that's something that once I think you show people, they can't unsee it. One of the specific reasons for writing the book was that I knew that if someone read it, they could still, quote unquote, take the easy way and avoid pursuing what they really want in their life. But they couldn't do that and say that they are smarter for having done so. They would have to say that I chose this choice, this path that produces less value for myself. It produces less value for my community. It gives me less chance to experience flow and joy. It makes me less resilient to adversity. I work in a more shallow manner by definition, and I don't understand commitment on a level that I could have otherwise. And I chose that because, Bitcoins are in, or whatever other surface level reason that you choose to give up what you really want to do. And it puts together a pretty black and white thing around something that is often just filled with emotion, I think. And emotions are fine, and I think we should respect and be in tune with our emotions, but I don't know anyone who is able to execute on a long, difficult journey like a life based on emotion only. We need something else to stand on. And so the book sort of maps that out in a way that I think really accomplishes that.
Jim Carrey has been talking a lot over the past few years and gives the example of, everyone's been talking a lot over the past few years. I should just clarify that.
That's right.
In many of Jim Carrey's interviews over the past few years, he's talked a lot of the example of his dad, actually. His dad was apparently an amazing comedian, and he had his shot to go down to New York. They were living in Canada, and he took the safe option of becoming an accountant. Yep. And years later, he was made redundant, lost his job, and was heartbroken. And, I think his family were homeless for a time, et cetera, et cetera. And so Jim Carrey talks a lot about this in terms of saying you can fail at everything. You're better off failing at the thing that you really wanted to go for and you really want to try, rather than the thing that was your second choice and you accepted. Because when you fail at the thing that you just kind of accepted that you didn't really want to do, the pain is greater.
And I think I was speaking with Carl actually the other day about this on the phone. I think if you look at human beings, we don't like to do anything really alone. There's good reason for that. And so if we sort of were able to somehow in our conversation right now just sort of like leave this room and sort of observe from like 10,000 feet up and just think about how people behave, I think we could see that folks who are by and large giving up this thing, they're essentially, let's say, taking the path of Jim Carrey's dad. In the book, that would be like going left, to be very clear. And Jim Carrey then did this thing going right, his choice to pursue his peak expression. Both camps, when you get there or you make that type of decision, really huddle up together. Because what do people do who are afraid and they give up the thing that's really itching at their heart, the thing that they really want, is they get to the accounting job, let's say in Jim Carrey's father's example, and the conversation really changes as people want to confirm the decisions that they're making. And they want to sort of commiserate in this thing that, like, it's hard, right? Like, we had to do this, right? It's okay, right? And they sort of lock arms in that way. And it's kind of sad to think about. A mistake I think that we make is the people who go the other way. So let's say Jim Carrey. You know, I've been fortunate to be in some ridiculous rooms every now and then with highly successful people like that. Like rooms I kind of don't. Like I'm the odd man out, right? And what I observe is that those people do the same thing. Like the Jim Carreys look across the room at, you know, the Pat Rileys, who looks across the room at the Rick Rubins, who looks across the room at the Laird Hamiltons, and then they lock arms in their own way. And there's a mutual respect and care for their vulnerability to put themselves out there for whatever it is that their thing, their pursuit is. Because they know how scary that is as well. Both people are scared. And what we don't talk about a lot is these people that we would unanimously say are successful. Like most people when interviewed would say, Jim Carrey, successful or not? We'd be like, yeah, he was one of the ones. He is this other. He is the type of person who is not like me. He did this thing that is exceptional and rare, and it's not the world that I live in. But I think if we were sitting here with Jim Carrey, he would describe a slightly different story, which is one full of shortcomings. Like he doesn't feel like he's arrived and done. He doesn't feel like his life has been like a big check mark. He's still like on his journey, and there's some level of sort of dissatisfaction in there, a lot of failure in there. We don't grant him that truth. And so what we do down here on like the decision-making floor is we say, well, I have these two choices. One feels like it's a little more certain, you know, Jim Carrey's dad, let's say, going to be this accountant thing. And the other one feels like I'm probably going to try really hard and I may get disappointed. When the truth is, hey, I can go and be this accountant and experience some disappointment and not quite live the life that I want. Or I can try to become this comedian and also not really like what I have and come up a little bit short and experience failure. And that both are uncertain and both are full of failure. And the people who actually go for it, the sort of hypothetical room that I just described of the successful people, they understand that. And I don't think we talk about that enough. You know, my experience of my life is full of failure as well. And I think people who don't know me would look and tell a different story. You know, like, because when I get introduced on podcasts, I say like former professional athlete, current, you know, entrepreneur of these successful businesses or whatever. It's like, I look at my baseball career and that was 20 years that resulted in a failure. You know, I look at my entrepreneurial career and I'm like gonna evaluate this moment. It's like, did I crush it? Like, is it over? Like, where's the gold medal? It feels really hard, actually. Like, I'm dealing with like gnarly emails and my own dissatisfaction about this thing. And so what's actually true is that being quote unquote successful and going for this sort of higher level pursuit doesn't really feel the way we assume that it feels. And so if you're going to begin a decision-making process with the assumption that being successful wouldn't include things like failure and uncertainty and adversity and disappointment, then you're not even starting from the right starting point. You know? And so when you look at it that way, it's sort of like, well, if failure and adversity and disappointment and difficulty are apparent in both choices, and only one gives me the opportunity to even pursue the things that I really want and to experience the highest expression of joy, then like, is there really even a choice? I mean, Jim Carrey actually has a very similar quote to that, right? Like, there is no choice once you see it that way, because the other one guarantees failure, disappointment, and misery in a lower self, and the other one is the only one that offers an opportunity. You know, it just seems very black and white in the opposite direction that way. I don't know. Jim Carrey is, I appreciate him. He's really evolving, right? If you see what he's doing.
How do you see the difference between perfection and excellence, or the search of those two?
That's a good point. So I think the way to sort of summarize this little rant I just finished is that's how we look at leadership. And so I'll sort of rope leadership in the excellence camp. There's a lot of different synonyms for this. We call it the standard, right? You know, in academia, they call it like a mental representation. Let's say in fashion or art, this word could be your taste. And it's sort of like the pinnacle vision. It is, or to use your language, perfection. And everyone who is striving for peak performance, their best self, the best sort of creation that they want to make, or the best maneuver they want to do in a you know, their sport, uses perfection as the model. In our mind, that's what we think, right? Like if you're making I don't know all the language, but like a certain pass in climbing, in your mind, in order to, if you're a high performance climber, you envision what it is that you're trying to do. Like there is a certain way that would go. It would feel a certain way. It would look a certain way. And then you attempt it. And then what you notice are all the sort of deviations from that thing. This is how painters paint. This is how architects do their design. This is how athletes perform their tasks on the field. And it's the quality of that image or that standard or mental representation that will guide your effort towards it. The better your taste, the better chance you have in designing an outfit or painting a painting. The better your mental representation of an ideal pass in, say, like a bouldering thing, the better chance you have in executing it. Now, what we need to talk about that isn't really talked about is that the people who are the best in the world at what they do have that, and then they make an attempt at it, and what their attempt looks like is some place below that ideal representation. You know, the best basketball players are not executing the perfect shot. The best race car drivers can imagine the perfect turn, but they're often not right on the mark. And I think the best in the world have a mindset that allows them to use that space and the deviation from that vision as information to guide their sort of next move. And so your question was like, well, what's the difference between excellence and perfection? Well, perfection is like our guide. This is the vision. And excellence comes from, it's more of a process. It's the pursuit of perfection, coming up short, and then revisiting it. And the best in the world, the people who are most excellent, tend to just operate closest to perfection. But they often, at least the best in the world, have a relationship with perfection that is, one, the guide, but two, is not, it's not sort of detrimental information when you're not living there. Because newsflash, no one's living there. You know? The best in the world are just the ones who are dancing closest to it. And if you're an egomaniac, which most of us are, you see perfection, you try it, you get some sort of dissatisfaction, this information that tells you, well, perfection is there, I'm here, there's space between us, this really challenges my ego, so I need to start acting funny, and I quit things, or I make other people wrong, or I do things to avoid this mirror in front of me. And the most sort of developmental mind would be one that could look at perfection as a guide, continually miss the mark, and selfishly use that information to get closer to the mark.
So the search for excellence is, that's how I'm understanding it, your ability to respond with a broader toolkit to move yourself towards executing something as close to your taste, standard, perfection as possible.
Yes, and the only reason why I can say yes, or I believe that I can say yes with such confidence, is it goes back to a view that's thousands and thousands of years old, this sort of Stoic view that all we can do is all we can do. So if I master my domain, which is that which is in my control, then that is literally the path to my best self. What is in my control is to notice, for example, where I am and my deviation from this vision of perfection. If there were some other thing to consider in that process, it would behoove us to consider it. But as long as it's outside of my control, it seems like wasted energy, wasted time, wasted emotion. And so when you look at it that way, it's sort of, it doesn't bring any extra sort of feel good, pampering or feel good emotion to this dynamic of what on paper looks like dissatisfaction. But it's sort of like, okay, you can have whatever relationship you want with this sort of dissatisfaction between where you are and the standard or the model of perfection. But if we're just going to look at, sort of put everything out on the table as to like what we will do next, one of the cards that you can sort of pick up is, I actually have specific information about how I could get closer to this perfection.
I've heard many artists talk about this in terms of the creative gap, like
Yeah.
wanting to create something and then being unable to create that. But over a time, to simplify it or to strip it down, the discipline, the starting, the discipline, the process makes that creative gap narrower and narrower.
Mm-hmm.
So you get closer and closer to your vision. Seems to be the hardest bit is to start. Many people don't get past that first hurdle because the perfection, becomes, just trying to strive to the perfect vision becomes like sort of the inhibitor to beginning.
It's daunting, right?
Yeah.
Because if your want.
So sorry.
Yeah.
No, go on.
Well, it's like if your want or your desire is this vision, like little kids who, let's use my example, who want to play in the major leagues, see a thing. They see big, tall people, strong people throwing balls fast and doing essentially tricks with baseballs and hitting baseballs far. If that becomes the model in your head and you say, I would really like to do that, it seems quite daunting to go out onto the field and then experience how far away you are from that thing, right? Like, I remember I really like art, and I used to love drawing. And when I was really young, my mom was pretty artistic, and we would draw things together. And I remember just throwing a fit that, like, I couldn't draw a straight line or I couldn't draw a circle. I'd look at all these lines and see how it's bumpy here, and I went, and it was emotionally really challenging because I could see the distance between what I just put on the paper and what I had in my mind. And that's that daunting thing, which is why I'm sort of saying that, like, having a relationship with that quote unquote dissatisfaction is the ace in the hole. Like, the willingness to put down a ugly line and then draw another line and draw another line is what gets you closer to the thing. In the book, I talk about this actually as one of the biggest challenges. This is what you're saying is starting, right? Is a really difficult part of this process. And I think part of this starting is so hard because we view this as some sort of accuracy test, you know? If you're 5 and you decide you want to be an artist, it feels scary because now I don't know what it's going to be like when I'm 18 or 25 or whatever. And it seems scary for me to decide this is what I want to do and then miss the mark down the road. So that icky feeling is something that prevents me from starting. And I make reference to a principle. I don't think we've talked about this before, but it's called the hiding hand principle.
No.
Have you heard this?
No.
So the example, I forget, who coined that term, but it's a Wikipedia-able thing. The classic example is there's a phenomenon that actually aids human beings' pursuit of difficult tasks like this, and it's called the hiding hand principle. And it addresses exactly what you're saying. The example used quite often is this group of miners who are drilling a mine shaft in the side of a mountain. And you can imagine that, let's say it's a group of 3 guys and they have this company and they have this desire to drill a mine shaft 2 miles into the side of this mountain. And so there's a planning phase. Well, there's these resources in here. We need to go 2 miles in. It'll probably take us, let's say, a crew of a dozen, and it'll take us 6 months, and this is our budget, and it'll be really difficult, arduous blue-collar work. We're going to be starting at 5 in the morning every morning. They're trying to anticipate what this process is going to be like, and they're planning for it. And then they begin, based on the information that they conjured up in this meeting. And 6 weeks in, they're working hard day after day in these mines, dirty, early mornings, etc. And they're, say, just for the sake of conversation, a quarter mile into the mine shaft. Now, they are closer, not yet there, but closer to this perfection, this standard, this mental representation in their head. And they actually have more information. They have a clearer picture. It's dirtier than they thought. The drilling into the side of the mountain is more difficult than they originally imagined. And now that they're here, dirty, tired, running out of money, etc., they're understanding that's actually way harder than they thought. But the advantage of this principle is that, hey, you're a quarter mile in now, so let's keep going. And it's almost as if they had that information, that more perfect information when they started, the task was actually more difficult, and they may not have started at all. And I do this mental experiment all the time, which is like, on one hand, the baseball version is if I knew everything about the sort of journey, all the hours and the heartache and the dissatisfaction and the ups and the downs of, let's say, my baseball career, and then I had all that information in my head. And I go back to age 7 telling my dad, I want to play in the major leagues, pointing at the Triple Crown trophy in Cooperstown, New York. It's like, with the weight of all that, would you still make that semi-lighthearted declaration? And like, maybe I would, maybe I wouldn't, but it's definitely more weighty. It's more difficult. Right now, I do it all the time with the gym, the gyms now, and the presence of the business and how it's grown. Like, would I go back to the Bluffs, the park there in Santa Monica, and begin hauling the truck out twice a day with all the gear to then rebuild what I have now? And I get the benefit of knowing that it ends well, which I didn't have in the beginning. But I do have very clear understanding of the totality of that effort. And it's not an easy yes all the time. It's, so we benefit from the ignorance of starting these things.
Yeah, I was going to say, I wholeheartedly believe in the power of naivety. Good things that have happened in my life have happened because I've had no idea what I'm doing.
Totally.
And you just begin. But I also think paradoxically, or the paradox of today's environment is that more than ever, or more than at any time in history, you can accumulate so much information to give you as good a start as possible that it becomes so overwhelming that you don't ever start.
Yeah. Well, that's the most common sort of failure, I think, in any undertaking, any difficult undertaking, and most people won't start. And that is a big paradox, and there's a lot inside of that. One being that people think there's a certain level of readiness that isn't real, and that's true of virtually anything. You know, I need to know more about this industry to begin in it. You know.
Okay, so very specifically, over the past week, we've been sea swimming with you twice, which is literally, you were saying, like the third and fourth time.
I was quadrupling my swim volume.
Right, and so the one on Saturday wasn't an easy one.
Oh,
So
that wasn't horrible. It was very challenging.
So is this a principle that you would take into everyday situations like that? Because it would have been very easy to have looked at the size of the waves and then the distance that you had to swim and be like, you know what, maybe I'll do like half the length of that.
Yeah. And the ability of the other people.
Yeah.
Because
you know what?
There was an Olympian
there. There was an Olympian there.
That's right. You know what? This is a perfect example because while swimming, I had no idea how far. When they said, hey, you're going around the jetty, I was like, I actually assumed that it was way further than it was, and just that, like, there's no way. So, like, I'll just get out whenever. And then we began swimming, and I'm in last place, proudly. And I was sort of doing what I could, and then about halfway through, I got information from a swim buddy, someone who was like hanging back with me, this guy, about the actual location of the jetty, and it was like further than I've ever swam before, and further than I anticipated swimming that day. But I didn't get that information until I was already, in the water, tired and cold and the whole thing, so that's a perfect example. I don't know that if I was on the beach sort of getting dressed, if they're like, you're going to swim right there, that I would have been like, yeah, of course.
If someone had said how far it was, like it's going to be, you're going to swim, 1,500 meters, would that have put you off?
Probably, yeah. Like if it was a binary thing, like swimming today means swimming around the jetty, and the jetty's right there. Yeah. It's however 1,000 meters away. That is swimming, and the other option is not swimming. I'd be like, oh, well, I'm obviously not swimming. Like, obviously. This is a perfect example.
And do you have this feeling with kind of where you are with your business? Because you just said, fortunately, or if I'd known that it ends well, because it's not ended yet.
That's right.
So do you continue that naivety where you are now with where you're going?
Yeah, actually. And I think what's interesting now about...
Because you could go, great, 4 gyms, amazing, done.
Totally.
Ebook, premium ebook. Premium. I've crushed it.
Seminars around the world.
Around the world.
Yeah.
When if, I guess the coach would go, you've got 3 seminars, Sydney, London, LA, yeah. That's not the world. They'd be totally. Like,
that's
back in the place.
Yeah, that's the other side of it. Yeah.
Not that I'm saying that, but geographically there
are other.
But you could be working harder, yeah?
Yes, of course. Absolutely. And I think what's actually interesting about where the business is now is I do have some very clear visions of like benchmark things that I want to see happen. However, the journey is much less guided by that. So in the beginning, all we could see was, say, getting from the park and this sort of incubated, sort of hypothetical training thing to, quote unquote, a real gym. And a successful one that did certain things or whatever, but like that is the vision. And then where we are now is in a place of growth beyond the original vision. However, we're sort of leaning really heavily on this stoic view that makes it actually quite okay in my mind that there isn't a whiteboard somewhere with like 16 gyms, 17 international seminar locations. You know, there is no whiteboard vision like that. So what we are doing rather is leaning quite heavily on this sort of stoic view, this process thing, to where I can't even conceive, no one has the creative bandwidth to see the potential of this thing, this venture. So rather than necessarily try to spend all this time predicting the future, we have so much work to be done in our processes to help manifest the future that we couldn't imagine anyway, that we will just begin there. And that's exactly why there are 3 gyms now, not 1. We were not even shopping for other gyms, so to speak. We were, because, you know, this is specific to the gym business a little bit maybe, but like there's just so much outside of your control, real estate wise. You know, like if that bag right there had $1 million in it, there's no guarantee that we could rent a space in, let's say, Santa Monica, California to open a gym. Like money or having expertise, those are not the barriers. The real estate thing is sort of like, there needs to be very specific inventory. There needs to be very specific parking things handled, and you just can't control that. And going through this process sort of showed us that. So, well, what do we do instead? We focus on absolutely crushing the things that are inside of our control. So the goal for a while now has been, I want to develop so many highly capable, motivated, bought-in leaders that there's just literally no place to put them. And that from the inside out, we can expand in ways that don't degrade us in value and that maintain the integrity of the thing. And then it grows in ways that we can't even predict. And that's how the other gyms have sort of manifested, because that's what's inside of our control. You know, an email comes in, a phone call comes in. Hey, I have this opportunity. I have this space. I have this gym. We're for sale, this, that, the other thing. And we can say yes. But when you do it result-oriented first, and you go back to this metaphorical whiteboard and it says, shoot, 17 gyms by 2020, then you start acting funny, and the cart's before the horse, and then you're just like making compromises everywhere to accomplish this sort of result first. And so I'm actually kind of enjoying living in this ultra process-oriented thing of like, I will lose no sleep tonight based on the fact that we will or won't open a 4th gym this year. No sleep. It's not even on my radar. But I do know that if the right thing comes around and the right opportunity comes up, that we'll be in position to do so much. I mean, we can do amazing things right now. If a corporation came by and said, I need you to put together a whole staff to train 1,000 people, we can do it tomorrow. If we wanted to scale, which we are in a sort of online presence, we have the manpower to do that. You know, we have the power to make, you know, documentaries and video features and all these things that we couldn't do before because we're just committed to the process. You know, and so that's I think the big shift that's been made, partly because I think we're at a place now where none of us can really control too much about where this goes in this particular industry, you know.
How then, maybe we just touch on it, but maybe touch on it a bit deeper. How then does the vision coexist alongside the process? Because without the vision, you don't know where you're going. But with the vision, it can completely hamper what it is that you do.
Of course. I mean, they work back and forth. And that's why I said there are some very specific things in terms of vision. You know, we have certain things we want to accomplish here in Venice, real estate wise, certain things we want to accomplish in terms of offering wise, you know, services. There's certain things that we want to do to accomplish, you know, internal things like monthly revenue and whatever, like those are in place, and it's a whole, you know, many full-time jobs devoted to accomplishing that. And we are inside of executing that vision. What I'm talking about is how do you execute on that vision and create upside for vision that you can't see yet, something that's in your blind spot? Having a online educational business that is essentially the size economically of the physical space business was not something I envisioned, was completely in my blind spot, completely something that I wasn't searching for, but it was made possible by a commitment to process. So if we go back to that vision part, if all I see and all I care about are the things that I just mentioned, the real estate goals that we have here in Venice, the revenue financial goals that we have here in Venice, the program offering goals, and that's all we're committed to is getting that result, then what we potentially relinquish are key processes that would allow upside beyond that. And sure, we could accomplish all three of those things, but likely nothing more. And so it's holding both in tandem. All I'm saying is that I'm very open and aware of the power of building something that has the opportunity to transcend itself. And that's like the opposite of the short-sighted view that is often very, very common, And so it's not in spite of vision. It's just working in the perspective that there's something beyond the vision, and that we can do 100 hours of work this week with only the vision in mind, or we can do the same 100 hours of work this week and open ourselves up for a reality beyond that, if it presents itself.
What does that feel like to you working within your team when kind of the goal is to transcend yourself? Because it's neither easy nor comfortable, yet hugely rewarding and vulnerable. It's a real mix of both ends of the spectrum.
Yeah, it is. I think the value in it that I hope I'm communicating and showing, and it shows up in our language, is that the sort of, to use that word, transcendence, provides optionality. Okay, if I am a movement coach, okay, so just let's use myself as an example really quick. I coached group strength and conditioning and got to a certain level of that ability. And then that sort of transcended that into this more specific role as a strongman person. I was teaching a seminar for CrossFit and became an athlete in that sport. In doing that specific transcendence, do I then erase and become no longer able to step into the role of group strength and conditioning coach? No, I have that option and this other thing, this strongman thing. So then when I do those things, and then I sort of try to advance myself into coaching other coaches, and then coaching other gym owners to coach coaches, do I then include and bring along this movement coach? Like, do I still have that? I do. I know I still have that. I can go to Europe or to some town in the US tomorrow and teach a damn good strongman seminar. But do those earlier versions of me have the option of doing that and this other thing? And the answer is no. And so the optionality presented by our own sort of evolution, or to use this like bigger word, transcendence, in and of itself has value because it just provides more option. And so in some ways, my opinion or my vision about this being important for us doesn't necessarily need to come with this feeling that, well, Logan has this vision that grows beyond this wonderful strength and conditioning community on the corner of Lincoln and Commonwealth in Venice. I kind of like it here. This transcendence is not at odds with that. To grow beyond yourself wouldn't mean saying goodbye to that. You could stay here at this gym for the rest of your life and and experience wonderful experiences and create value for yourself and others and all of that, still, you wouldn't have to give that up. And so hopefully I'm modeling that truth a little bit, that I'm sort of like pushing myself to grow beyond those previous versions of myself. But I don't have to. I don't have to give that up. Just because I wrote a book, does that mean now I'm an author and I can't do pull-ups?
No.
No, right? Like that.
No, you
right?
can't do pull-ups.
That's
now,
right. You're right. I can no longer do pull-ups. Not with a pencil in my hand. And so that to me is the sort of no-brainer upside of the thing. Growth we talk about, not my words, but follows this sort of this model of like transcend and include. And it's not just transcend, it's also include. And so you can be and do and live exactly how you are right now and hold more space and be capable of more. You don't have to quit your job and move on, so to speak. So for me, it's just optionality.
Does that challenge societal patterns? And I say that obviously being in England, looking at America, it's very much
how are we doing? How do we look?
Well, good and bad, but there's very much an ability to go, I want to be better. That would be one of my views on the US.
Okay.
It's like they strive. It's like it's always about just pats on the back. And England's, we talk about this in the car, kind of different. It's like, okay, we'll just give it a go, which is incredible when you go way back, because we did quite a lot in the world at one point. It's like we can't have had that mindset then to do what we did, but now it just seems there's an apathy. There's apathy's the right word. We're kind of apathetic to improving, going, okay, well, that's just the way it is.
It's interesting. And it's difficult to speak in absolute truths about big groups, you know what I mean? But like, just let's talk conceptually about what you're saying right now. Is that apathy, or what sounds like what was the last thing you said? There's an apathy, and then there's this feeling of like, that's the way things are.
That's the way things are.
That's the way things are, and that's okay. However, we know that this goes back to like the Stoic part of it. To me, inside of that sort of generalized talk, right, is a view that might say, well, there are all of these things that are outside of my control. Would you look at that? And it sort of neglects, or can neglect, the part of the story that is inside of your control. And I think at its worst, I'm taking this a step further that might not be true, but at its worst, that is...
Take it all away.
Take it all away. A victim mentality. And victim is a very charged word, but what I mean when I say victim is someone who is in the framework or the belief that their world or their existence is decided for them and happens to them. Now, I would make a strong case that is almost never true, which is a difficult thing to do considering the plight of many people who are born into communities that are underserved and dangerous, and people who are, to use the same word, victims of atrocious crimes and war, etc. Even in those extreme instances, it really does not pay to be of the belief that your life is decided for you. In fact, we can look at the most aggressive extremes, from the Holocaust to examples of individuals who have survived extreme bouts with torture or have been prisoners of war, or all these scenarios where I think any of us would look at it and be like, that's pretty much decided for them. You don't get much choice. You don't have a name anymore. You don't get to decide what you wear. You don't get to decide what you eat. You don't get to decide whether you live or die. To me, that seems pretty extreme in terms of victim, right? I'm talking about a mentality, and the people who survive and even thrive beyond situations like that have something in common. And that thing that is in common amongst them is that they connect with, however small, that which is inside of their control. To the point of like prisoners of war, for example, across, countries and across eras and time periods will do things like food strike, hunger strike. Because what is that? If you're going to call me names and beat me and kill my comrades and, tell me when to eat, when to sleep, torture me, etc., and I have some choice in you saying food and I say no, I just made a choice. There's something about this that is inside of my control, and people literally survive environments that are almost impossible to survive based on that small connection to what is inside of their control. And we know that the victim mindset is a mindset that chemically does not allow us to experience happiness. If you are of the belief that your existence is provided for you and you have zero control, it is impossible to be simultaneously a victim and happy at the same time. In a performance environment, if you are not getting down to work on the things that are, however small, inside of your control, that is the margin from which you will lose. And so I don't know about the sort of national consciousness of Britain or the national consciousness of the United States, but all I know is that there is something in there for all of us in taking up the mindset that we have some things inside of our control, even, hell, I don't know, like even if it's not true, right? Like imagine a thought experiment where you are in an environment where literally nothing is inside of your control. Even then, it would pay to assume that something is, because it gives you the upside, the chance for a positive outcome, right? That's what people are doing in this decision-making problem that we sort of presented earlier. Even if we could know in the future that you will never become the rock star, or that you will never play in the NFL, or that you will never, your art will never be on display in a gallery, and that is decided for you. Even if there's a half of a 1% of a chance, it pays to embody and live inside of the worldview that says you do have an effect on that outcome. Because the alternative is, what are we even doing here? Nothing means anything, and we shouldn't do anything. You're exactly right. Just never leave the couch, And so whether it's true or not, it pays to live as if better is inside of your control, and you should try to be that.
So do you then relinquish using art? I'll never have my art inside a gallery. You don't think about that finality, because that's like when you achieve it, then you're done, aren't you? So do you just not think about that, and because you then do have a choice to continue to paint, and one day, if you continue the process, it might happen.
That's right. So here's the ultimate asterisk we put on this whole thing, which is that only the participant will know the answer to that. Is that their goal? Is that their ultimate goal, to have their artwork in a gallery? And if so, then absolutely go for it, see it, envision it, do it. What we know about most people who have that sort of vision is that it gets you only so far. And as you get closer to it, it's like a horizon, right? It's still out there. It maybe changes. They get into the gallery and they realize, that's amazing. I actually have new goals. And then you continue forward. But if you go way back to the start and you say, hey, I'm going to base my whole life on this binary thing, get in the gallery or not get in the gallery, and you're going to use that as a way to never start, then there's this whole future that we can't know about, right? The whole moving horizon idea. I didn't have any sort of real plan Bs in my life because I didn't think it really paid to have them. So I viewed my version of getting my art in the art gallery was playing Major League Baseball. Well, as I got closer to that thing, and then my art never got in the art gallery, I got quite close, but not there. I could see more now, and I could see where I can and would like to go next. I think it's a fake thought experiment to say like, well, you shouldn't go for things because when you get there, then you're done and there's nothing else to do. It's like, that's not real. Like we're not in a vacuum. I bet you would learn so much about yourself and evolve so much as a person that if you went on that undertaking and got your art in the art gallery, that you'd be a completely different person who would have all kinds of other things that they would want to do when they got there. And I'd rather meet that person than the person who never starts painting because they're worried they never get in the art gallery. I wouldn't want to hire that person. I wouldn't want to be friends with that person. I wouldn't want to date that person, given the choice.
Yeah.
To the alternative.
I'm going to leave you guys talking. I need to go and take some pictures.
Okay.
Make them good, all right? We've got a gallery to get into.
I've already done it, mate. I've already done it. Nice one. Thanks, Logan. I'll catch you back at the
Thank
gym
you.
a bit.
Okay.
We can carry on, or we can head back in.
Oh, it's up to you. I don't know.
Carry on. Conversation's great. I just need to go because I'm
Yeah.
I've always wanted to say carry on as an American. Carry on. I don't know if I've ever said that.
That's the English way of not having a. That's the horizon. We just go carry on.
I love that.
I think that's how we got the empire. We just carried on.
You just carried on, right? Now here you are.
How do you stay connected to people when you're constantly going through something that is changing all the time?
That's a great question, and something that I'm admittedly not good at. Something that I'm sort of needing to learn at a rapid pace. I do find that there is a certain connection, sort of like I made reference to earlier, that other people who are on that journey tend to recognize it and see it and want to be close to it, even if the journey is quite different. So like when we originally met, you were striving to build a magazine from nothing.
Yep. And
I was quite connected to you, and I'm not trying to build a magazine, and I'm not interested in that. I think your magazine is great. I don't want to make a magazine, but there was a connection there because I connect to and empathize with and want to be close to that type of vulnerability, that type of passion. It's the universal skills that you're learning and that I think maybe I'm learning that are similar, that have nothing to do with a specific pursuit, and that is not to be judgmental, but I think that is the positive flip side version of that sort of commiserating that we see happen when people who act out of fear and sort of give up this thing, they also get together and sort of connect on that fear. And so I would say that's the way that I do it. I don't know if it's good or healthy or whatever, but that's what I observe happening in my life, and it's connected me with beautiful people that have really helped me and brought me great joy. I think the shadow of that, every strength or potential, I don't know, thing with upside leaves a shadow, and I think the shadow of that is in its own way on these types of pursuits I feel quite ruthless a little bit on those connections. And if people, I feel like what I'm doing is so hard that if people aren't in support of that, or they're sort of, I don't know, toxic in some way or just not helpful, then it makes it unfortunately quite easy to not put energy in that direction.
Yeah.
And so it can hurt relationships as well. I'm not here to decide whether that's good or bad, but that's what I observe.
Yeah.
Yeah, because
teams kind of ebb and flow, don't they?
Teams do. I think, we were talking about this course I took in Amsterdam, the neuro-linguistic programming thing. And without getting into the whole thing, part of it is understanding the different ways in which people orient themselves in the world. They're sort of like their view, their lens, what type of information they receive in the world and how they perceive it and how they attribute value. It's amazing that any of us ever get along, based on just those simple truths, let alone get together in a group and do something coordinated, yet that's the most human thing to do. Like, our coordination is what has allowed us to rule over and subsequently ruin the planet. It's not our big muscles or our big fangs, that allowed us to do that. It's that we can send an email and BCC everybody and like make a company, and coordinate an effort, right?
Yeah.
But inside of that is, I think, our biggest challenges. I think if you asked anyone, I mean, if you ask me, I would answer it this way: the hardest parts of my job or life are interpersonal ones. Isn't it? Like those are usually the hardest, most complex things. And so it's a puzzle that is well worth figuring out, but it's hard.
How did you find the NLP?
I did a visualization in NLP.
Or why did you do it, first of all?
I did it because I was doing therapy at the time,
right,
of an NLP style. And, selfishly, it was on my radar for like public speaking reasons. But then the trigger that sort of I pulled on it was sort of motivated by, this sort of therapy context. And I think most people, at least in that course that I took, most people were there to become a coach of NLP or a therapist of NLP or something like that. And I was just there for the NLP, and selfishly to use that in any way that would serve me. And the way that it shows up is in all of the areas, it shows up in my coaching and my mentorship, in my leadership, in my own personal life, in my interpersonal relationships, and in my public speaking, right? And so it's a beautiful tool. But you learn that people are experiencing the world in very different ways. And one of the biggest mistakes that people make, whether they're in leadership or not, is they don't see that, because as long as you're looking out through your own two eyes, you could quite easily be fooled into thinking that that's the world that other people see.
Yeah.
And it's not even close, So
that's the thing that I think we've probably learnt most on this trip. Everyone we've seen, from Arthur Joseph, the vocal awareness coach, how we communicate, yourself, Sal having experiences diving, and then this guy Tony Molina with this postural realignment.
Yeah.
Amazing. Even we were doing an exercise with Tony, and eyes shut, arms out, march on the spot. If we're looking this way, I was turned over there, and I thought I was turned that way.
Your awareness, right?
And he did some stuff with my eyes, and then I was dead center. And then we had to go cross-eyed, and he took a picture. My cross-eyed and Chris's cross-eyed. Chris was like one eye up here.
What?
And he was like, we see, no wonder we have all these problems.
Yeah.
Because we literally see different things when we're looking at the same thing.
Totally. And then the whole trippy thing is like, there are billions of bits of information in our natural world, like in this room right now. But we're not really fit for all that information, right? We love to talk about how amazing our brains are, but they're not that good, right? And so they can only take in, 6 or 7 at a time. And so we're all sort of doing this full-time job of interpreting the world. Like, there's things about this room that you remember and could recall that aren't even on my radar, and vice versa.
I love the yellow walls.
Yeah, that's right. I've literally never seen that.
Well, I heard that we only have, or the majority of people have 500 words in their vocabulary.
That I would imagine.
So they can only communicate with those 500.
Yeah, and then some languages have words for things that require multiple sentences to explain, things like that. Yeah.
But make a much more three-dimensional
totally.
explanation of something.
Totally.
And that comes back to perfection and excellence. They're sort of seen as the same thing, but they're quite radically different.
Yeah, I mean, because I just haven't seen perfection before, I don't know what that is, right? But I think we all make it up in our head.
Well, that it's finite.
Yeah.
I always talk about iPhones. When Chris and I are putting the magazine together, my thing is, it just has to be good enough to keep us moving to the next one.
Right.
Good enough is seen as this, like, giving up.
It's a sin, yeah.
But
it is a sin,
when I'm climbing, it only needs to be good enough that I don't fall off.
Right. It's like least effective dose kind of thing.
Yeah. But MVP every move. But, when I'm at the top, when I'm still living,
it's pretty good result. Yeah.
And it will improve over time, where my energy expenditure will be less. But this idea of good enough, as opposed to taking the perfect shot, like, does it convey what I want that person to see in the image? Like, Chris and I are always talking about this in image. It's like, it's not 1 million pixels, and it's like, but no one ever sees it in 1 million pixels. They see it in 728. We're at 800 already. We've gone beyond the horizon.
Yeah.
They don't even realize.
I think the thing that makes us uneasy in the stomach about this is, at least for me, is we know that it's a slippery slope. So I know what I'm saying when I say, hey, there's this perfection or this standard, and then we strive for it. Like, you really, like, not pretend to strive for it. Like, you know what I mean? Like, hey, here's the standard, and I'm going to go for it. Wink, wink, but we're going to fail, and it's okay. Like, that doesn't count. It's, here's the standard. Let's make an attempt at it vulnerably, like, as if it's possible. Then fail, then reassess.
Yeah, don't fail first.
And I think it's a difficult thing to talk about, because people in let's say a low performance mentality could sort of steal this logic to write off sort of efforts that aren't really genuine and aren't really their best, right? Like, it's okay, right? It's good enough, and there's a slight difference, but it's a key difference,
But that comes back to words again and communication. Like, when we have this good enough conversation, in my head it's still excellent.
Mm-hmm.
It just doesn't have to be. I think technology does it really well. Like, you never see the full potential of a camera because nothing's ever printed in on a billboard and pin sharp. We see it at, like, we see a screen. So you don't, the quality of the equipment needs to be good enough to have that.
I think about that a lot, right? It's like a lot of things are shot in 4K, but almost nothing's watched in 4K, for example.
Or ever printed.
Yeah.
And you're like, okay.
Yeah, that's weird. It's funny. I remember my parents are the coolest. The reason why this is coming up is because I was a really good student growing up. Almost like better than the expectation of my parents, which is usually the other way around, right? Like, parents are like, I would like my kids to get straight A's, and the kids are like, I got 3 B's, is that okay? There's like a dynamic like that. And my dad was always like, and it's a fine line, it's the line that we're talking about right now with, like, good enough, because he never was saying it as if, like, to sandbag or, like, not do your best or whatever. But he literally told me, he's like, I don't want you to get, like, straight A's. Like, especially with all the things that you want to do. Like, because if you're getting straight A's, then, like, you're probably, not blowing it, but, like, that's my words, and the best I can come up with right now is, like, blowing it in other areas.
Well, that's seen as perfection, I guess, and then you're done.
Right. And so he was literally, like, a parent that was like, yeah, no, like, that, don't get straight A's. That's weird. you know. It's interesting, and I think again it all is made easier by your relationship to that dissatisfaction. Like I'm quite I don't want to say it doesn't hurt me or doesn't dissatisfaction like doesn't magically like feel warm and fuzzy to me, but I have a relationship with it where I'm just very okay with trying and failing and feeling that sort of feeling it in my gut for a moment, just because I sort of see what's inside it for me. And I recognize and I'm very grateful for that perspective because I know what it provides, what it makes available. Or, you know, I've worked with people and I know people, we all know people that cannot bear to face that mirror. You know, it's like their relationship with that sort of dissatisfaction is crippling to the point where they'd rather not do something, or if they got feedback telling them that they weren't perfect, it causes a complete meltdown interpersonally, you know. And gosh, that seems like a really hard way to go through life. It's like a full-time job, avoiding the truth and creating this like narrative that like you're perfect or something. You know, it's crazy.
And that's I get maybe the difference between good teams and ones that really go on to do good stuff.
That's definitely one part of it, at least what like we talk about with the culture thing, is because first of all, if we can agree that the pursuit of perfection, like when you ask me like what's the difference between perfection and excellence, well, perfection is the model, excellence is like the reality, and it comes from,
and pursuit of perfection implies
excellence.
Yeah.
And so,
but to become excellent, you don't be perfect every time.
Well, you
then
can't.
You don't.
If you would, then rock on. But I just don't know what that is. I don't think anybody knows what that is. So, you know, this is true in teams, and it's made more difficult in teams. But let's just say an individual or a team, in theory, will improve best, most specifically, if it has the best information. So, like, if you wanted to be the best in the world at basketball and you're practicing shooting your shot, and we took you out back to the basketball hoop and we had just unlimited basketballs, and you're just going to start getting your reps because that's what you do when you want to be good at something, right? And you're going to take these shots and you could feel the ball leaving your fingertips, and you could practice your routine, and we could look at your body alignment. But if I didn't let you see if the ball was going in the hoop or not, like it was behind a barrier and you're just shooting, and like maybe I would know or maybe no one would know. You don't have great information, right? Like how would you make an adjustment between your fourth shot and your fifth shot?
Yeah.
You're going on bad information. So up to a certain level, we need the proper truth to make decisions based on, to make adjustments based on. And in theory, you would need the best information to make the best adjustment, right? At least the truth. Well, when you get in groups, it gets extra difficult because the complexity raises to another level, and now feedback becomes muddled. Like, why does feedback become muddled? Well, it's because we're emotional beings. And if what I need to tell you is that, like, the aperture on your shot that you just took in Joshua Tree is off, and this is the consequence that it's having here in the print, is going to hurt your feelings, then I may not tell you that, or I may tell you a less true version of that. And so now what we do is we create a low performance environment where our truth isn't really true, and the information that's being exchanged isn't really good information because it's maybe only the good stuff and a little bit of the bad stuff. And so now we're metaphorically practicing our basketball shots without even information of like, are we making the shot? Should I make an adjustment? I don't really even know. And maybe that saves us a little bit of acute heartache from someone telling you something that doesn't feel so good. But it's definitely not the highest performing way to work with each other.
Yeah.
And so teams that either get over that shit, or most commonly teams that get over it because their purpose is so strong that it transcends whatever feel good vibe we need between us, to where we can start communicating truthfully, allows for the highest performance. You know, and as we talked about this, I think, on the last podcast, it's the reason why world champion sports teams don't talk to each other in the locker room the way that people in mid-level manager positions talk to each other in corporate America. You know, because if like my whole livelihood doesn't depend on the third quarter, you know, of sales for this like insurance company that I mildly care about, then like maybe I'm not gonna put myself out there to tell Rick in accounting that like his spreadsheet was formatted wrong. Maybe it's just not worth it. But if I spent the last 30 years of my life perfecting my craft to wear a Super Bowl ring, dude, I'm going to tell you, you're missing your cut on the pass route, you know? And so in groups, it's just exponentially more complex because of those dynamics.
Mm. Yeah, there's a book, I can't remember, I can never remember the name of it, but it's about a chess player that wanted to become a professional golfer, and he was like, you know, unbeatable at chess.
Mm-hmm.
And he went to, kind of got his clubs, all of that set up with a pro, and he was like, let's go to the tee, driver straight out, and the pro was like, oh no, we're going to start at the hole and work all the way back.
That's right.
It's like, so you're always focused on,
Yeah.
you know, you always know why you're doing it. 'Cause
Yeah.
it feels like you go to a driving range and it's just, you just hit that ball.
Yeah.
and
Whack it out. Yeah, totally.
hook.
Was
cut,
that good?
Doesn't matter. It's just like 500 yards.
Totally. I actually, as a really poor golfer, I know that feeling. Like when you don't know anything about the game, hitting a golf ball is an amazing thing. I'm really not good at it, but like even watching someone else, it's like just the distances involved and then the size of the ball. You're like, you just performed a godly act. That ball was here a second ago, and now it's the next city over. Like, that's amazing. Except for, like, if you're really a golfer, it needs to be not just the next city over, but, like, on a specific line, you know? So the worst shot in the world to me that, like, or to a real golfer that, like, hooks way right, you know, if I hit that shot, I'm like, I can walk on water right now. That is amazing. You know?
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it's quite a good book. Quite interesting. Change the way I look at things. It's like start where you want to be,
Mm-hmm.
and then work it back.
That's a good.
So you're always remembering why you're,
Yeah.
you know, why you're doing it.
Yeah.
Books, because we could probably talk and ramble for ages.
Yeah.
Lots of interesting books. You know, surprisingly few sports and strength and conditioning books in there.
Yeah, I don't have a lot of those. I mean, I do have several old important ones, but yeah, I think
The Road to Excellence there.
yeah, The Road to Excellence.
Immunity to Change.
Immunity to Change is a Robert Keegan book who, you know, I think we talked about last time quite a
Yeah.
bit. This is going to be controversial, but I think based on what I just said about what really trips us up, like what really gets in our way, something technical like coaching skill
Mm-hmm.
at some point is no longer the limiting factor. Now, a lot of people who are maybe fitness coaches or fitness professionals just sort of are upset now because what they think I just said is that you shouldn't continue to evolve your craft of coaching. That's not what I'm saying. I just mean that there's many, many more highly technically capable coaches who cannot work with others. They cannot demonstrate excellence. They cannot grow a business. They cannot do all these other things. And so, yes, that's at the core, and that is a threshold that you must reach, a certain level of expertise, and you can and should continue that. But in our model of what excellent coaching is, there's the technical base. That's what I just said. And then your ability to hold your craft in context is sort of the next ring outside. And then outside of that, finally, is the leadership component. And that's very rare, to have the technical base and be able to hold it in context, transcend and include, and be able to do that all inside of leadership. Would explain why many of these books have nothing to do with fitness. It's dare I say, more rare, difficult, and important to address the sort of adaptive challenges of any craft. Like at some point, let's say like in your guys' magazine, like at some point, is the success or failure in your guys accomplishing what it is that you want to accomplish going to come down to another class in photography? And it gets back to what you just said about good enough, like how much more expensive of a lens do you need? Like how better angled does the shot you just took in Joshua Tree need to be to get the magazine to the place you want it to go?
Well, it's never perfect. We found that with doing what we're doing.
It's never perfect. And also that stuff matters less and less and less and less as you recognize what truly is the challenge in front of you, And I think a lot of, at least in my industry, I would imagine this is true beyond it, in fitness, there's a lot of people really failing, and they're really convincing themselves it's because they haven't taken another movement seminar, right? Or they just don't know enough about the anatomy of the foot. Is that it? When's the last time you told anyone that you coach everything that you currently know about the foot? Never? Is that it? Right? And so I think sometimes we get distracted and think that our biggest troubles are found inside of more information. Yes, it's important to a certain level. Like going back to what we just talked about, I've never made this connection before, but it's coming to me right now. It's like I said earlier that the more accurate or the better your mental representation, the better chance you have for success, right? The more, the better your taste, the better chance you have to design a better dress if you're a designer. But up to a certain point, right? Like the difference between someone breaking through and being, Louis Vuitton or, a major brand on the scene is probably going to come from factors outside of the technical base of that craft.
That's hard for people to understand when you're in a world.
Surely. Yeah.
Because oftentimes it's the magic comes when it is out of your control. Say with clothes, you can design the best thing in the world, but if you don't deliver it in when a customer wants to buy it,
totally
doesn't matter.
Yeah.
But people will obsess over this, and this detail, and it's like, great, it'll be another 6 weeks. It's like, I want to buy it now.
Yep. Then you miss your shipping date and it's all redundant, right? Yeah, I think it's a distraction. Also awareness. Like if it lies outside of your awareness, then many people have blinders on and this lies in a blind spot.
Yeah. Does that comes back to naivety? Then you can kind of swing or make shots, make moves because you don't know the consequence of it. And then, well, I'm a great believer in that. That's kind of how Chris and I do the majority of things. It's just like we'll be incredibly naive about something with enough competence to get us there, almost so people accept us in.
Mm-hmm.
And then, we were in the sea with an Olympian Chris and I had no right being there. At least you had a wetsuit.
That's right. That's right. Almost there. Yes, but also, I don't think you're giving yourself enough credit because you are gathering information as you go. You know, like if you guys were so closed off and closed-minded to competing information and sort of, you know, feedback that would take you in another direction, you might make the mistake of thinking that like your purpose on this planet is to like make print magazines. And then there would never be a podcast, and then there never would be a dinner in London, and then there would never be like these things that you guys are working on now, you know? And so then being naive got you in, but your openness to information while being inside is allowing yourself to evolve, you know? And that bit of evolution is the part that I think some people are unwilling to entertain. And
is that because people want to do everything?
Well, I think in a technical sense, yeah, most businesses and quote unquote leaders stay small in their impact because they either their ego doesn't want them to build something bigger than themselves, or some other sort of limiting belief like that. You know, I think it generally comes down to the fact that taking up information, seeking out information that would compete with your current beliefs is not a comfortable process. You know, seems like a long way to fly and a lot of work and a lot of money to come out here to like get a notion that like, hey, maybe we're more than a print magazine. You know, it seems like this is hard enough, man. I want to hear people support this thing. You know, so if you don't have anything to say that's like going to confirm what we already believe to be true, then I'm not really trying to hear that.
Is that a real danger of all of this, that people just want, I guess when you're training someone, it's like the praise and you're like, you know, you can do a lot more, but if you're constantly receiving praise at a low level, then you've almost achieved perfection, haven't you? The bar goes up or whatever, you know, you do.
It feels good to get that. It just it really guarantees that growth is going to stop there. You know, and so I think in the early part of skill development, we talk about this a lot in the summits. Like in the early part of skill development, just par for the course is negative feedback, right? Like you go to the driving range for the first time and it's like you take your first swing and you break the tee and it's just like it's an ugly shot and that's feedback. And then you make an adjustment and you get better and you get better and you get better. Every single skill that we've ever learned, we've gone through that feedback loop process. The examples I talk a lot about in the summit are like driving for one and your handwriting for two, you know. It's like, so at a certain point we develop our skills to a level that makes feedback either few and far between or just like non-existent at all because we're good enough kind of thing. Coaches experience this a lot because coaching class or coaching a client doesn't stress them out anymore. And while that's quite nice and comfortable, it does guarantee that you're not going to get better, and most people actually get worse after a period of time. You know, I'm a much less attentive driver than when I was 16 years old, you know, worried about killing someone on the road or whatever. And my handwriting generally is guided by the eyeballs that are going to judge it, you know. And so since I'm not getting a grade on it with that little piece of paper you had with the 3 lines on it, I kind of don't care if I make a mistake, right? And now my handwriting is maybe worse. And so people who really understand development then will steal what they know about any skill development, and they can artificially create situations and environments and feedback structures that will encourage their growth. And people who don't stagnate and get worse, and this happens all the time. And the sort of secret sauce behind that is disconfirming information. You know, it's finding out that, yeah, your handwriting has all these mistakes that you haven't seen, or that whereas, yeah, you've done a satisfactory job coaching the last 200 classes that you've coached inside of your business, but there's all these things that haven't been in your awareness, that you tend to use the same style cueing all the time, or you're not able to reach athletes with this type of issue, or that, you know, and so you can sort of extend that growth process by adding the stress back into what it is that you do. You know, like you guys, I wasn't there for it, but it sounded like you went to this vocal coach, and by bringing awareness to things that like are so far outside of your awareness when you're speaking, like your breath, you're now, for lack of a better word, stressed and improving and making adjustments on something that is just completely out of your awareness.
Yeah,
in every word that you say, you know.
Yeah, and when he said that, you kind of feel like you're being schooled.
Yeah,
and it's uncomfortable because you know I've got this, I can speak.
Totally.
You know,
he's like, oh wait, so you've literally never done this when you said a sentence? Like, what you knew? And you're like, oh.
Yeah, that was amazing. And I, on our car journeys to and from wherever we've been, we kind of reflect on who we've met.
Mm-hmm.
And it feels like that's if people were to do anything, because obviously some people don't want to do strength and conditioning, or starting with your ability to communicate will lead on, is almost the fundamental, because we all have to do it.
Totally.
We all have to breathe, we all have to speak.
Mm-hmm.
As the baseline, like that will get you
totally
to the next stage and the next stage. And it was like, wow, okay. Everyone should be vocally aware.
Totally. Especially like we said earlier, everybody is seeing the world in a different way. So we make major assumptions when we communicate that what we intend to say is being heard that way. And it's almost never the case.
Yeah. And then with tools like NLP, because I was saying that in my previous life in the company, I met this NLP coach and I wanted all my team to be able to go, do you know what, I'm not happy doing what I'm doing, but feel comfortable enough to go, this isn't me. Because you get that a lot. You know, we had retail stores and everyone's, you know, they're on to bigger and better things. It's like, well, go and do it then.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it's a heavy blow to have to remove someone as opposed to them and go, do you know what? It's Monday morning. I'm ready to be the photographer. Yeah. So I'm leaving now. No hard feelings. Like try and transition that. Because otherwise people...
Yeah, like resentment and things come up. And yeah.
And they're not communicating what they really want to do. They're telling people what they think the other person wants to know. I guess you find that in coaching or poor coaches. Like, oh, that was amazing. You know, form's terrible.
Yeah, was it?
You know, we've missed all our sales.
That's right.
And you're like, awesome. Yeah. Really pleased.
Outfit looks good. You know, yeah. And that's just going back to what we said, like going off bad information. You know? It's not even really the truth.
Yeah.
And I think, you know, if we all were pulled aside outside of that context and asked, you know, if they're interested in the truth, we'd all be like, yeah, for sure. I want to work in a place that's open and honest and truthful. And then fear creeps in, and then we manifest the exact thing that we don't want, which is like this sort of altered reality sort of thing that promotes politics and uneasiness and lack of transparency.
Yeah.
It's weird.
Is that what makes sport and movement, particularly professional sport, like that's the thing? Because having met you and Carrey and other, you know, professionals or ex-professionals, whatever, there's a certain steeliness there. There's a resolve of mind to be like, okay, tell me what I've done wrong. Correct. Move on. Like it seems to be, whereas you meet an artist and there's a bit more, you know, expression.
Yeah, that's right. I think there's a winner's circle bias there a little bit, to where if you reach a certain level in athletics, chances are you have that mentality because that mentality yields results. I think sports, and any other context that provides very rigorous, objective feedback, like war, something I don't know anything about, is very rigorous and very objective. Like, is your buddy dead or is your buddy alive? And so it really ramps up to the truth, and it really ramps up to like the need for feedback and improvement.
Yeah.
So you sort of like, it's much easier to sort of sign off on how anybody feels about whatever. At some point, if your livelihood depends on your ability to like hit a baseball on a certain pitch on a certain part of the field, and you don't do it, it doesn't really pay to like have a bunch of reasons why that didn't happen. You sort of just need to get to the better result, and it's just very black and white. So I think it promotes at a high level that mentality, which has benefits universally, is what I'm sort of the belief of. But I think there's a winner's circle bias there, where people who have reached a certain level of their craft, specifically ones that provide feedback, that's what sports are, right? Like, we make rules up, and we make parameters to provide feedback. This is boxing. We both had to stand up, and I get to punch you. I can't kick you, but I can punch you. If we clinch and hold for too long, then a referee guy comes in, he splits us up, and then we box. But we only do this for 5 minutes, and then we take a minute break, and then you win if you land more punches or if I get knocked out.
Yeah.
Cool. And then now we have a framework to understand what's better. Whereas, like, if we didn't have that framework before, we wouldn't be able to go on great information. Like, if we were just fighting in the backyard with no real rules, things like gamesmanship about like blocking shots or using the jab or something else, these technical things wouldn't come up, because maybe in the backyard the only thing that really matters is who gets knocked out and who doesn't. And you can see how that nuance is brought about, that attention to detail is brought about by the sport of boxing. If in baseball, like, there weren't 3 outs an inning and first base, second base, third base, and these foul lines and fair, like, the game would lose context, and you wouldn't be able to really dial in on the details that seemingly matter because of that thing. And so sport is just like a feedback loop. If all that went away, then nothing would really matter, and you wouldn't have the skill development, because where would it be developing to? What's good, what's bad, what helps, what doesn't.
Do you think that's prompted the growth in movement, fitness? I mean, it's always growing. Everyone's like, the fitness world's blowing up, but now more than ever, it seems to be diversifying. Everyone wants to perfect a handstand or a snatch or whatever. They're the feedback loops and the framework that we don't have. And then how do they transition that into their life?
Yeah, I think...
So you're not just living for the perfect handstand. It's like you can apply that handstand into...
Well, firstly, most people aren't there yet, where they're talking about like high-level skill transfer. Like Carl leads that conversation.
Yeah.
Most people aren't ready for that thing. Most people are like, I go to the gym because my belly hangs out or whatever. And that's okay, but like that's the limit of the reason for being in practice of that thing.
And then they invariably stop.
It is a much more fragile framework than a bigger one.
Yeah.
Yes. But a lot of people that come in for that stay for other reasons, and that's a different conversation. And if I'm going to generalize, I think the thing that you're getting to with like maybe a growth in people seeking, like you said, the perfect snatch or the perfect handstand, is a shift, sort of a global shift in frameworks or worldviews about fitness, to where if I was going to stereotype fitness in the minds of the consumer, let's say 70s, 80s, 90s, fitness felt like a thing, like you would do fitness oriented things over there to sort of remedy some of the things that you are doing wrong here in your life. And fitness in general was it was sort of like viewed as like a bank, and you would make like deposits, so you would smoke a certain amount of cigarettes and have a certain amount of beers and a certain amount of bread, and then like you would go to the fitness bank and you would sort of try to fix your balance sheet, so to speak. And that was the limit of the exchange. And now fitness is being sort of quantified with standards and skill, which is sort of newer, right? And that if everything is a skill, then everything can be done better. And then you then can own skills. Like people's language around the gym is like, I have a freestanding handstand. Do you have a freestanding handstand? Whereas like 20 years ago, it would be like, I need to go shed some calories. And that would be sort of the limit of that. And what you would do in the gym and the standards that you would or wouldn't comply to would sort of just be around like how much you can sweat. And that's like about it. But now this like worldview is coming to a place of like, well, I can master and then own these skills that sort of like compound, which is kind of cool. So like if I don't have a push-up, and then if one day I got to a place where I owned 30 push-ups, and then I worked on this sort of like balance thing and this, pulling strength thing. Like if I got 30 pull-ups, then one day I could get this other thing that's not possible. I could get this muscle up one day. And then now I have a thing that I didn't have before that has nothing to do with calories in and calories out. And that's kind of cool, selfishly, because even, again, go back to this transcend and include thing, even if you are interested in less belly fat, including that goal and transcending it into acquiring skills can accomplish both. Whereas the previous framework can only hold enough space for calories in, calories out. And like we sort of alluded to earlier, you said those people kind of quit, the belly fat people. A lot of them quit if that remains the extent of why they're doing it, because that's a pretty flimsy purpose, and like we've been talking about all day, long, difficult pursuits endure sort of bouts with adversity. You get the flu and then it's really hard to come back to the gym, or you get stressed out, or you overdraft your bank account, and then it's just like doing the extra work to get back to the thing. For belly fat, just doesn't really seem like a big enough deal, right? And that's why it's a fragile pursuit. But if who you are as a physical being and what you can and can't do is a way that you identify with and how you create value, then like, of course I can't not go to the gym and train, because all these other things that I attribute value to, what I have and what I can do, And then the next level is sort of like what our friend Carl is trying to do, which is saying like, you kind of can do these things for the sake of doing them, but look what's available to you with skill transfer. What is it that you really get by pursuing these things? Namely, things outside of the gym. And that's a really cool conversation, and it includes all the previous conversations too.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, it seems like that's where it's headed.
Hopefully,
which is quite cool. Well, it's very cool.
Yeah, I think that would have the current most effect, so far, and then it goes on from there.
Right, last question. I need 3 books from your...
Okay. Wow. All right. I'll try to not name books I've named before.
Well, if it's a good one.
Okay. Well, if I mention mindset, everybody's gonna roll their eyes who's heard a podcast of mine. Let's do this. Controversial one. I'll say the fountainhead, not for reasons that most people think. Ayn Rand's quite controversial, but in terms of self-respect and commitment to like personal excellence, I think it's a great.
So that's The Fountainhead by Ayn Rand.
Yeah, great.
Okay.
Read in that way. No compromises to self-respect. What do we have here? I may have mentioned this one before, but I'll mention it. Robert Keegan's "And Everyone" culture.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and that
You mentioned that in the summit.
yeah, in the summit I did, and that just talks about the sort of highest performing organizations in the world having a extreme focus on development, so that like there's your bottom line and then there's development, and both are equally important. And then let's do Nassim Taleb's "Fooled by Randomness." I think normally I mention other ones of his, but that's I think the first one to read,
Right.
and that is a great way to remove yourself of this narrative fallacy, right? To like try to prescribe meaning and a story to things where there may or may not be meaning or story, which we do often.
Regularly. Awesome. Right. Well, we'll get those. I'll let Chris read them and I'll listen to them.
Yeah, perfect.
Awesome.
Thank you
Thanks,
so
Logan.
much. This is fun.
Pleasure.
Next time.